It is a great honor and a privilege to introduce Saadia, Bahat, and in Lithuania it was Bokshitzky. And how did you have the name? How did the family get the name Bokshitzky?
Our roots are in a little village near Alytus, the town where I was born, a village named Bokshitzky, and two Jewish families came out of there, from Bokshitzky and Bokshansky. What I remember is my grandfather was fighting that the Bokshanskys shouldn't call themselves Bokshitzky, because Bokshitzky is much more important. I only don't know why it is important. So we were Bokshitzky family, and my father was an only son, but he had an uncle and 4 aunts living in adjacent houses on the main street of Alytus, were belonging to our family. As a small child, I could enter every house there and get sweets and get drinks, because I was. I'm calling it, my English edition of my book is called From Childhood Paradise to Hell and Back, because my childhood really was a paradise. It couldn't be better.
So here's a copy of your book in English, and you've done it in Hebrew and in Lithuanian as well.
Yeah.
And Saadia, when were you born?
Please?
What was the date with you were born?
I was born in 1928. That's not that far away. 1928, July 27. And I had a sister 13 months older than me. So we were a small family. And my father was officially was a lawyer, but he also organized and commanded the voluntary fire brigade. And in 1918, when Lithuania got independence, my father organized the police of Alytus, and he was the chief of the police for some time. Then he was a secretary of the municipal, of the town, secretary of the town. So it was very famous. He's a very complicated story, I would say, but when the Germans occupied Alytus in 1914, 15, when they were leaving Alytus at the end of the war, a group of officers came over and announced that they are going to explode 3 bridges, a railway bridge and 2 bridges for cars, and they are ready not to explode them if they will get some 3 million liters, the Lithuanian money. And as my father knew, he was fluent in German, so he accepted the officers, he gave them to drink and eat, and somehow they signed that they are passing the bridges and the telephone station and the electrical station, passing to my father. So it was very important there. He was very much accepted there.
And can I ask you, Saadia, your father's parents, you've got a beautiful picture of your grandparents.
Those are my father's parents.
Are there many?
Maternal grandparents.
Are there many generations in Lithuania?
Well, I don't know, but I have a copy of the registration of the wedding of Lippe and Breine. Lippe and Breine, in 1862 they were married, and as there was written that the bridegroom was 24 years and all the bride was 22 years, and it's written that the parents of both of them were born and lived in Alytus. So this means that at the beginning of the 19th century, they were already living in Alytus. When they came to Bukshiškai, I don't know. So it's a very old family there. When I met the mayor of Alytus, he made a reception of us. So I told him that I don't know the list of the people of Alytus, but if somebody belongs to Alytus, that's me, because the Bukshinsky family will belong to this town. That's for sure.
And so you have a picture of your home.
Please.
This is a picture of your home.
A picture from home is right there. So we were living downstairs, and the grandparents were living on the second floor.
And you remember your grandparents?
Of course, of course. Not only this, I had the opportunity to meet Breine, my grandfather's mother lived far into the 90s, and she was sick, and we were not allowed to enter her room, but we would knock on her window, and she would open. She would give us sweets in the boxes of her medicine. She would get small boxes of medicine, so she would put sweets, and we met her still.
And the page before, you have a picture of the street.
That's the street. In
Alytus.
That shows in World War I, where the families, Gura, that were already cousins of my father, but that was Chaim Bukshinsky, that's also interesting, and Adelson. So there were, Chaim Bukshinsky was my father's uncle. But Lippe and Breine didn't have a son, Chaim. They had a son, David, but we think that he was sick, and there was a tradition to add the name Chaim. So we knew him as Chaim, but he was born as David. That's for sure. We have registrations of the date is okay, and his daughter was in Netanya, and now we are good friends with her daughter. She lived in Jerusalem until a year ago. Now she lives in Modi'in.
And you said you have a picture of your father?
Yes, my father at the age of 18, I think, and so those are the pictures of.
Now I have to ask you, how did these pictures survive?
So my mother was sending albums to her sister and her brother that lived in Palestine. So when I came over, And then there was a very, very nice, interesting lady. It was the sister of my grandma, of her maternal grandmother. And she was a wonderful woman, and we loved her very much. And in 1933, there was a remount. They were renewing our house, and we were taken to Calvaria to our grandmother. So officially, because we were taken to our grandmother, but her sister was the main thing. And when my sister already learned at school, so she had to come back when the school year started. But I said, I do not want to go. I want to stay some more time with Donna Esther. And that's my father.
Yeah, your father was in the Supreme Court.
That's my father, the court. That's my father as commander of firemen. If you have a good look, we are here, my sister and myself, because they chased us, that we shouldn't stand by my father being photographed.
And you remember you had a happy upbringing?
Please?
You had a happy childhood?
Couldn't be better, because my parents were very advanced people, and we could speak with, ask everything of my mother or my father. Then there was something that was called my father's school. On Shabbat, he would lay down to have a rest. My sister and me would come over to lie near him, and we had to prepare questions, and we would ask him, and he would give us entire lectures there. And there are things that I remember. Yes, when I asked him, who is the best composer in the world? He answered me, Beethoven. So I think the same way, but I wouldn't answer it right away. Oh, but I once asked him, how do you make cement? So I said, I don't know. I will have to look up in the book, and next Saturday you will get an explanation. And it was an explanation. Then he was telling us stories that were for weeks, every week. He knew exactly where he stopped. So there was about the Eskimos. So it was going on for months. He was telling us the stories. And we were a very advanced family.
Were you a traditional family? Was it a traditional?
No, traditional were our grandparents. The grandparents of both sides were Orthodox, more or less. My parents were already free. They were not religious.
But did they keep any of the holidays, or?
Please?
Did they keep Shabbat or any of the holidays?
No, but it was kosher. And we had a maid, a Lithuanian maid, and she knew everything, how to do it. So we had dishes for every day, and we had dishes for Pesach. And everything was under command of Rosalia. Rosalia knew. So, and so that's where we lived. My maternal grandparents came from Calvaria. And my mother had 2 sisters and 3 brothers. There were 6 children. And somehow a very nice connection developed between the family of my father and my mother. There were meetings with all the families. It was a very, very nice life, wonderful. And there were traditional holidays that were, I think, Pesach, the Seder was at grandparents, but Shavuot, I think, was in our house. And so they were coming together, and already in those days, in the 1930s, my uncle from Kaunas had a car, so it was simple. He was a doctor, and from the 6 children in my mother's family, there were 4 doctors, medical doctors, 2 of them married doctors. So it was it's just a special thing to be in a family of doctors. And there was a meeting. Yesterday I had a very interesting case. He almost died. So that's very, very interesting.
And so you have a picture, I think, of your mother.
Please? Yeah, that's my mother. My mother, there she's with her 2 sisters.
And the one on the right?
Those are the 3 brothers.
The 3 brothers, and those are the 3 sisters. And did your mother study as well?
Yes.
Did your mother study? Did she also...
Every question of yours has a long answer. In 1914, the Russians chased out the Jews from Lithuania, from the guberniate, from the places that were Russian, because Alytus was divided by the river Neman into 2 parts. One part was the Russian and one part was the Polish. So my parents stayed in Lithuania. From Kalvaria, they were chased out, and they were in Ukraine. My mother finished high school in Chernigov. And near the end of the World War I, my mother got very sick with dysentery. So she started medicine, but it was too difficult for her. So she did, but she helped her brother that was in Kalvaria, a famous doctor, and she was very good. She rescued my life once. Yes, when I called her that I was sick, and I called her that I feel very bad, and first of all she gave me codeine, and then he called the doctor. When he came, he said that without codeine, maybe that I wouldn't be anymore there.
I think it took down your temperature. You must have had a very high temperature.
Please?
You could have had a high temperature.
Yeah. Okay. That's my great-grandparents in Kalvaria. That's their home, which looks now this way because now there's the city council there.
But it's
so
the same...
the same building. They covered it. You see 1911. This is the 1911 she's here. And, interesting, the house of my father's grandparents was also built in 1911.
It says 1911.
No, that's written here. It's MB in Russian, it's Mordechai Bukhshitsky, 1911.
And Saadia, who's standing outside the house?
Please?
We have people standing outside the house in that picture.
There's a better picture of it. No.
I'll just put this in. You can see.
1937. Oh, that's the picture.
That's a picture.
That's a picture. Those are two last pictures before the war, the World War.
And you,
So,
you and your sister as well?
so that's my father. That's my eldest uncle, Lebush. This is Abrasha. This is my mother. This is Abrasha's wife. And that's my sister and myself.
And how old are you in this picture?
Please?
How old are you in the picture?
It's 1937 and I was born 28. I'm 11 years old.
And you remember the picture? You remember that day?
No, but it's written that everybody is very sad because they are going to the cemetery to visit the tomb of our grandparents. So my mother is with flowers.
With flowers.
Because they are on their way to the cemetery.
And the picture next to it?
Please, the picture next to it is my mother, my sister, myself.
And you, wow,
that's the last picture.
That's the last picture?
Yes, because somehow in Vilnius we didn't take all of the pictures. It's the right answer.
It's amazing, yes. It's these are such memories. Such
incredible. You have it there also.
And Saadia, can I ask, what is your first memories growing up? If you look
My
back.
very first memories, the kindergarten, near a rack with towels, and I'm crying somewhere because that's my very first memories. That might be from the age of 3. Now, I started remembering from a shock that I had. I told you that I stayed in Calvaria with Aunt Esther, and on a Saturday, on Shabbat, we went to a river not far, some 2-3 kilometers from Calvaria. When we walked back, a young man with a bicycle came by, who knew them. They talked to them, and then he proposed to take me on bicycle. And he brought me to my grandfather's house. I asked, do you know how to enter? Of course I know. And I entered the front door. I went up the stairs, and I couldn't reach the bell. You had to turn the bell. It was not an electric one. And it was maybe 10 centimeters about my heart. And I was standing and crying there. And it was a real shock because there was a double door against the frost. Now, when everybody came, they entered the back door because there the maid was there and it was open. I didn't think about it. And when they went out to look for me because I was not at home, then they found me standing there, and it was a real shock. So from that time I remember. From that time on, then I was 5 years old.
5 years old. Mm-hmm. And the school you went to, was it a public school?
First of all, it was in Alytus. I was going to a Jewish school, so Tarbut. And it was meant to be a Hebrew school, but the teachers didn't know enough Hebrew. They were Bachurei Yeshiva, and they didn't know. It was the level of the school wasn't good. We had one young teacher of Hebrew grammar, and she was a teacher. But the rest were very bad. And the last year in 1938, before leaving Alytus, there came a young teacher, a girl, and she was the educator of my sister's class, and in several months my sister started speaking Hebrew, because she was a real. And then when we moved over to Vilnius, I said that I'm not going anymore to a Jewish school. And that was a big mistake, because in Vilna, Jewish schools were at a very high level. But I was so much shocked by it. I promised my parents that I will do my best. I want to go to a Lithuanian school. And really they hired a high school student that would come to me at 6 o'clock in the morning before she went to school and give me a lesson and help me with my homework. And I flourished. I was after less than half a year at a Lithuanian school, I was already the Lithuanist of the newspaper, school newspaper. The Lithuanist was
like the editor.
I was correcting the Lithuanian language, but I liked it very much, although we were only 2 Jewish boys in the entire school.
And did you ever have any anti-Jewish, anti-Semitism?
No, there was at Pesach, I would bring a sandwich of matzah. So all the children asked for a bit. They wanted for the first time in their life to try what matzah means. But I was popular there. I didn't have friends, because I don't know. It's the first time that I lived in a big town, and I don't know even where they lived, the other students. But at school we were very good friends.
And the teachers, did they know you were Jewish?
Please?
The teachers, they knew?
No, only Lithuanian.
But did they know that you were Jewish?
Please?
Did they know you were Jewish, that you were Jewish?
Yes, they knew.
And there was never anti-Jewish feeling, or?
No, I didn't feel. I know there was anti-Semitism in Lithuania. That's again, I will tell you a short story. My youngest uncle, from my finished mechanical engineer, but he was a very gifted man, and he wanted to go on for a PhD in mathematics. So he took his documents to the rector of the university in Kaunas, and he said that he would like to stay at the university as a teaching assistant and make his PhD in mathematics. So the rector looked at the documents and he said, "Oh, we were really very good students, but I have already one Jew." And that's what was enough to bring my uncle to Haifa. He married and left Lithuania. And some 30 years ago or so, which is a very short time for me, my cousin, he studied cardiology, and he went to the United States. He stayed there afterwards. He became a very world-famous cardiologist, and he came to a conference of cardiologists in Europe somewhere. And a delegation of Lithuanian cardiologists came over to him, and I invited him to come for a series of lectures in Lithuania. My cousin, the first thing was, he called me, "What do you think? Should I go now?" So I say, "Of course you should go and tell them the truth, why you're an American cardiologist and not a Lithuanian cardiologist, because of of the answer that your father got at the university. And it was so. He told them, and they accepted him very, very nicely. And very, very interesting stories, because he came with his brother and his brother's wife they, on this invitation to Lithuania. And the Lithuanians gave them a guide that knew Hebrew in Vilna. A cousin of my wife from Atlantic City went to Lithuania. They hired a tourist guide. I understood very fast that was the same Regina, the same one. So she's a good friend of ours now.
That's amazing.
The world is very small.
It's very small. So you've got such beautiful pictures of your parents when they got married.
Yeah, that's the wedding picture of them.
And your father had a telephone. Here's a picture of your father and your mother in his office.
Yeah. And here you can actually see the number of our phone. Our phone was 61. The number of our phone in Litus. That's an interesting picture is this. My mother lies in the bed, and it's written on the other side of the picture, it's written in Russian that when you have no problems in your life, you get pictures in your bed, because that was a great thing to get a picture. Yeah. It was not so simple.
It wasn't.
So that's written on the other side of the picture. And here, look at the handwriting of my mother.
It's beautiful.
You see, she was writing wonderfully.
Very gifted, yeah.
Oh, she was painting a little, she was embroidering.
You have lovely
my
pictures.
book that's written about it.
You have lovely pictures of you with your family.
Oh, yes.
These are such, when you were growing up.
Maybe that here, I'm here 1 year old, and I have keys to the future. Keys to the future of the world. You see, I have keys in my hand. So that was.
And here's with both grandparents. It's such a beautiful picture.
I worked on that, and I worked on the Photoshop.
Okay, so you put it, but it's magnificent.
The pictures, I renewed them.
But it's really special.
And that's very special. Three generations.
Yeah,
my parents, my mother's father and mother, my father, and my sister and myself. I'm many times advising people that as long as they can, let them take a three-generation picture.
It's magnificent. You can see you were a very happy family, very...
Yes. Here we behaved very badly. So we're in a summer house and we behaved very badly. So my father told us that he's going to take a picture, so we should behave. And then there's another picture that you could take twice if you didn't advance the film. There was no automatic. So there was a picture that looks like this with my aunt. Also, some of it, she was photographed times ago. So this is our family in winter, our family in summer.
And why did your family go to Vilna? Why did your family move to Vilna?
My father decided, and he was very right, that as a Lithuanian lawyer, he will have a lot of work in Vilna, because Vilna was 20 years under the Polish reign. So a Lithuanian lawyer will have a lot of work, and that was right, because we hired a special girl that would open the door to the clients, and she worked until 12 at night, because there were a lot of work. And it took more than a year, because in 1940 the Russians came. Russians occupied Lithuania in 1940.
Do you remember when the Russians came?
First of all, into our apartment, an additional family was sent in by the Russians, and it was a doctor, a gynecologist, and he would operate women, and his wife, with dishes with blood, would go to the bedroom to spill it. It took some time until we got used to the Russian Lithuania, because my father couldn't be a private lawyer. He went to be a lawyer of some cooperative, and my mother was forced to work. She never did work, so she was an accountant.
And this family that came, was it a Jewish family?
Yeah. Yeah, but they were given some rooms. We had a very large apartment. There must be a picture from house. So we were walking around, touring around a lot, and that's a picture of my mother's family came over to Alytus to visit us.
Hey, such beautiful pictures.
This is the Aunt Esther. That's my Rachel, my aunt who came to Palestine. It's also a nice story. She came at the beginning of the 30s. She was a doctor, and her husband was one of the editors of Davar, of the newspaper Davar. So he was living in Tel Aviv. She didn't find as a doctor at a Jewish institution. She was the only Jew and the only Jewish woman and the only Jewish doctor in Ramallah. And in 1967 she went to see the family, the Arab family at whose home she lived. And during all those years, one of them was traveling to meet, she was traveling to Tel Aviv, or her husband was traveling to Jerusalem, and there were times of the 39 was very dangerous to go this road. So every week one of them traveled.
Mm-hmm. And Saadia, what did you speak at home? Did you speak?
Please?
Did you speak Russian, or did you speak Yiddish with your parents?
I didn't speak any word in another language with my parents but Yiddish.
Yiddish.
My father wanted us to speak Lithuanian. My mother wanted us to speak Russian. So I knew Lithuanian, I knew Russian, but I didn't speak any word. I said, I'm speaking with my parents only in Mameloshen. So never ever did I speak only Yiddish.
And with your sister?
With your sister also Yiddish. Only for 2 short periods. When my parents decided that we have to learn Deutsche Ordnung, they brought a teacher, a girl from Germany, to teach us Deutsche Ordnung, and they forced us to speak. With my sister, I had to speak German. But my grandfather went to one day to the park, and he heard a child crying. So he came over to see who it was. And I was crying because she would beat me. And that was her ticket to go home. But my parents didn't, saw that's an exception. So they brought another teacher. And It was very interesting. We had to speak German among us, and in the evening we had to pray in bed. To sit down, lieber Gott, ich bitte dich, dass du mich behütest. And we would say the father's name and mother's name, and we wouldn't say this Peter's her name. So that was our way to fighting her. And one summer day, there was a bathing resort, a plaza near the river. So our parents didn't have time, so the German teacher took us and the daughter of our neighbors. We went to the river, and somehow my father finished work, and my father and my mother came over to see us at the riverside. They found us near the fence there sitting with folded arms, and they tried to speak to us, and we didn't answer. So they were looking for the Fräulein. Where is the... She was playing with some boys with a ball. So she, why are the children not speaking to us? They don't answer our questions. So she says, I don't know. And she brought us to us, and she asked, why didn't you answer your parents? Because you told us that if we will speak to somebody, you will kill us. So this was her ticket to go home. So that was the end of the Deutsche Ordnung.
Yeah. But your parents' education was very important in your family. It was...
Yes. But my parents knew a lot by heart. My mother knew a lot of German literature, Russian literature. My father knew very good 10 languages. Against smoking, in his working room there were signs in 30 languages. Now, before the war started, he decided to teach me Esperanto. So he made placards and he wanted to put it on the walls, but then the war started already. So I don't know Esperanto. But why he used this knowledge of languages, he collected stamps. So he wanted stamps from countries that he doesn't know, but he would write in Esperanto and get the answers and would take the stamps. But anyway, I have somewhere a letter that my father wrote to a friend of his in the United States. And he writes, I already had 26 lessons in English, so I believe that I'm already ready to write a letter in English. There's a folio paper, and I found there 3 mistakes. But he had only 26 languages. But I believe that if you know many languages, the additional ones go very easily. It's the same with me.
It's a gift. It's a gift.
We once went to Scandinavia, and we went to Stockholm, and I went to buy cottage cheese. And on the cover of the cottage cheese was a recipe of a cheesecake with nuts in Swedish. I translated it to my wife because it's very simple. Swedish is not far away. I had a problem when we rented a car. We came back to Oslo, and I had to return my car. And I went to the information. I asked, where do I return my car? So she said, no problem. You go out from my office, you go to the right at the corner, there is the place of the returning cars. So I went out, there was a problem, because there were no corners because the road was a round one. So we are trying, we're going, and all of a sudden I said to my wife, that's here. So how do you know? Okay, it's written in Norwegian, because I already learned that in Norwegian, from the word automobile, most languages take the auto. The Norwegians take bil, and there was written bil outleihe. Now, ausleihen is to rent. So I told my wife, that's written in good Norwegian, and it's written there, that's here.
It's amazing, sure.
So,
Saadia, that's
no, I have no problems with languages, because I was at a student exchange program in Holland, and after 2 months I read a really heavy book on the Oorlog, the World War in Dutch.
in Dutch.
So,
And Saadia, when you were in Vilna,
please,
when you were living in Vilna,
yeah.
did you ever go to the synagogue, or did you remember the Jewish quarter in Vilna?
The war started 5 weeks before my bar mitzvah, and there was a plan for me to learn the Haftarah at the synagogue, but war started. I still didn't take my bar mitzvah, but war started. Maybe that there is, I don't know if I have here the that's how we were living in Vilna.
Do you remember the street?
Oh yes, of course, we were there. I were there very. I came to Vilna the first time. We came in 1996. 1996. They got independent 1991. 96 we came, and the roof of the house collapsed, and they didn't know if they will rebuild it or ruin it. Now in 1997 I went with our children. We came there and we went around. We couldn't enter because the doors were locked and closed by
So here you had, it was in Pelimo Street.
Pilimo Street.
Pelimo Street.
The Polish called it Zawalna.
Your balcony is the second one from the left.
So,
And you have memories, you have good memories from
please.
before
There's
your bar
5
mitzvah.
months before my bar mitzvah.
And who took-
My bar mitzvah should be July 27th. The war started June 22nd.
And who did you start learning your Haftarah?
No, we started the war at the first night with 18 hours of bombing. I call it my adolescence period, because I started it as a spoiled child. But next morning, after 18 hours of bombardment, I was already more or less grown up.
But can I just ask, have you already started learning your Haftarah?
Please?
Did you start learning your Haftarah?
No, because the plan was a month before.
You learned it.
It was more or less a month before the bar mitzvah. I had to start.
But could you read Hebrew?
I learned Hebrew in Lealitus.
And you remember the Hebrew? You remember?
Yes, the school in Anitos, the Talmud school, taught according to the plan of the Lithuanian education ministry. But 2 hours after the studies, we had Tanakh. But our teacher, we called him Tzigene Berdl. He was a Bachur Yeshiva, and I know that he was a very bad pedagogue, but once he hit one of the boys on his head, hit an inhale, and it broke off, and it broke the window. And that was something. The Tzigene Berdl broke a window but my sister was very good. When there was some tacharot of Tanakh, she won the first place.
The competition, it was...
That was interesting because the boys were meant to know better, but she knew.
And Saadia, when you were in Vilna, did you ever go to the Jewish quarter? Did you ever go?
Oh, as it was the first time that I was in a big town, I was walking around, and Pilimo is not far, it's very near the old city. So the Jewish street, the street of the glass makers, and the street of the butchers, and the old streets, of course I were there.
And you saw a lot of...
Those 2 years until the war, I was touring as much as possible, although there was a time of my development, my technical skills, because I was in a group of technical work and models of airplanes I was building. So I was flourishing there. I was very, very glad there. My sister played the violin, and she learned in the conservatorium there. And I was very, very happy there.
When you were growing up, did you hear of Bialik, and did you hear of...
So I knew it from the school in Alitos, because there we learned it.
And your parents, were they reading Yiddish papers, or did they know it was...
Of course, the Stimme. I think the Stimme, there was, my father was, he had several newspapers. In my book there is politics. Politics in our family. My mother was Shomer Sair, but she was in Vitz also. But my father was Tzionim Klalim. Tzionim Klalim, there wasn't a right wing. So my father would laugh that my mother is Stalin because she's a socialist. And I think I'm writing there about before elections for the Congress. My father had a copying machine, a Shapirograph. That was something you would write what you need with special ink on a paper, and then you would put it on this machine, and there was a belt that was absorbing the ink, and I was volunteering to turn the handle, and I think it would print 20, 25 pages, then you would write again with a new one. Oh, there were things that was my specialty. When my parents made some party, so I was turning the gramophone.
For the music?
Yeah,
the records.
Of course. And if you don't turn it, it stops.
And at this time, did you know, or were you aware of what was going on in Germany? with Hitler and with the rise of...
I started be aware of the newspapers in 1936, and I was when the war in Spain started, the Civil War in Spain. So I'm not entirely sure, but I think that I know the photograph of Kappa, the photographer, took a picture of a soldier being hit.
It's a very famous picture.
Falling down. So I believe that I still saw it in the newspaper in 1936. That's when I started reading newspapers. And we had a radio. It was very rare. It was a big cabinet, a wooden cabinet with a telefunken. It was. So I knew what was going on with there were people that were chased away from Poland, and from Germany, and the Polish people didn't accept them, and they were between both borders, and there was a ship that was sent to the United States.
The St. Louis. The St. Louis.
Yeah. So we followed it.
You followed about the ship that was returned.
Yeah.
It couldn't enter Cuba and it couldn't enter America or Canada.
But you know, still we were children, and before the war started, there was a tension there. The grown-ups were speaking, they were whispering when we were entering the room. But there was something, and I don't know. They even started to gather some food, and one day my father came with an entire leg of a cow. It was salted, so it could be without refrigeration. It was hanged at the door of the kitchen, I remember it. And so they were nervous. The grown-ups started to be nervous. They knew that something is, but still we were living as children. That was still our paradise. And on June 22nd, 41, it was Sunday, and my parents planned to go to Trakai. Trakai is
the lake.
The lake with a
castle.
Medieval castle. And on our way to exit our apartment, my father turned on the radio, and he heard a speech of Hitler declaring war on Russia. You know, at those times, he was lying all the way. It started with Poland. He sent Polish prisoners with German clothes, and they, as if they attacked Germany. But besides all that, war was declared. So my father heard the declaration of the war, and that was the first time that I saw tears in my father's eyes. As a premonition, although at the German occupation in 1914, 1918, the occupation was very human, and then he started his work as lawyer because he knew German, so he started by writing petitions to the government, and then he became to represent people at the court. And then when Lithuania got independent, he went to the university, finished his studies, but he was a lawyer with neshama, of an engineer. He always was building and he was a lawyer.
Did your father and mother ever make plans?
Please?
Did they ever make plans to leave Lithuania, to try and go to Palestine, British Palestine, or to go to America? They never made plans.
No, I don't know, because my father had some of my father's relatives lived to America. They even changed the name. I know that our Bokshinsky turned into Bachman. They were Bachmans.
But your parents didn't want to go to America.
No, they wanted to go to Israel, to Palestine. And one of the pictures on the back is written that my mother writes that next year I hope that we will take the picture in Palestine. But her sister came to visit, and she said that will be too difficult for you. My mother was regarded that she's very a weak person. When my father was killed, was murdered, my mother was very, very strong. But she was regarded to be a very weak person. So her sister persuaded her not to go. And that was not far from the war. That was only 38 or so. And she did it one more time after World War, because we had relatives in Paris, and during the war they went to Bordeaux, and one of their sons decided that he wants to be a naval officer, and the husband of this Mary knew very good Hebrew. I subscribed for him the Israeli newspaper. So they wanted to come because he knew that in Akko there is a naval officer school. So they wanted to come to, then it was Israel. And my aunt again said it will be too difficult for them. And they stayed there, and we finished a French naval officer school, and I think he has 5 little Frenchmen because he married a French girl.
Was she a Jewish girl?
No, a French.
French.
And his brother was a doctor in Paris, and I visited them. And his daughter was then 17 years old, and she told me to make a contact to meet the Mossad. I'm ready to die for Israel. So I told her, first of all, come to Israel and try to live for Israel. Afterwards you will die for Israel. Some 2 years later, she married the son of a priest. And her son was a Christian. He was at the ceremony of the church, yes. So he lived after wanting to die for Israel. She became the wife of the son of a priest.
Saadia, it's amazing. Saadia, go back. You remember the bombing when the Germans started to bomb Lithuania and Vilna?
Oh yes, of course, but it was 2 days later. So the first night starts when, after we didn't go to Trakai, we heard that their store, not far from us, will be opening. Although it is Sunday, they will open and will give half a package of butter. So war started. So my sister and me were sent to the store to get a half package of butter, and we were standing in the row, and all of a sudden, airplane came, and bombing started, and I had already some physics, so I tried to calm the people and said, don't be afraid so much, because the airplane are already above us, so the bombs will fall much farther away. But it didn't help. So we bought a half package of butter. We ran home, and our parents were already waiting for us. And the basement was not ready to accept people. It was full of ancient furniture and so. So we were all of the two houses were the house in front and the same house back in the yard, and there was a gateway to go to the other building, and it was shut with a wooden gate. So they shut the gate, and all the people of the two buildings sit down in this passage. Everybody took a chair and some blanket. We were sitting, and the bombing was very bad because Pilimo Street starts with a bridge, an important bridge, and ends with the railway station. The Germans knew that they will enter, so they didn't want to destroy the railway station. They didn't want to destroy the bridge, so they bombed along the road. So a significant part of the bombarding was on our street. And at midnight, there was a hit. The wooden gate opened up. There was a lot of smoke, and everybody put down his head, ready to get the house collapsing on our heads. And it didn't collapse. Next morning, we realized that two bombs simultaneously hit the house across the street from us. But until the morning, the bombing stopped. I don't know at what hour, but 18 hours it took. And that was really, really my adolescence period. I changed entirely in this. Because when I entered it as a spoiled child, I didn't eat many things. In the morning I ate everything, and I was all. And then it started already. Every day the Germans made another decree. First of all was the Star of David, the yellow star.
Do you remember the Germans coming into your street, or do you remember?
Yes. They were 2 days later. Tuesday they came in. But the second night was also not very simple. During the day, people cleaned the basement so that we can already sit in the basement. And we decided to go down to the basement. And before that, I went on the terrace, and I saw a man with a white band. I didn't know still what a white band means. That was the pro-German Lithuanians. Came to the crossroads near our house, and with a rifle, and he shot at every direction, in the 4 directions of the crossroads, and I ran. We went into the basement, closed the door, and there was some battle outside, partisan battle, we do not know what, and somebody was badly wounded, and our basement had a window that came some 20 centimeters above the sidewalk. And they put the wounded man there, and he was crying and shouting for several hours. And then I think he died there. But nobody went out because we didn't know who is fighting against who. We didn't know what happens outside. Next day there was only the blood at the place where he went. But at the age of less than 13, sitting for hours with a wounded man shouting was also a very, very bad education. And that's only the start, because every day was another decree of the Germans, and always it was signed that if somebody doesn't obey, he will be sentenced to death on the spot. And so it started to be very dangerous to go out into the street, and my father was kidnapped some 3 days after the Germans came, and we didn't know anything for all the day. And late in the evening he came half dead home at the airport of Vilnius. So the Russians left warning signs of mines. So at that time we were cleaning mines by leading around a herd of cattle or of whatever. The Germans didn't need it, they have Jews. So they took some 30, 40 Jews, they put them in a line at a safe distance. The Germans chased them around all the day. It was a very hot day. And I know that my father already couldn't endure it because they didn't get any water, any food. And the German soldier washed himself in a little dish, and he went out to spill the water. So my father succeeded to stop him and ask him to let him have some drink of the salt water, of the soap water. To the German it was very, very interesting. The Jew drinks this dirty water. But so my father came back half dead at home, and he told us that he was ordered to come next day again to this work, for this work, and he was not going to go to work. He was not going once more, and my mother helped him to the shower, and he came to lay down in bed, and there was an alarm because the Russians bombed, and my mother with my sister came to call us to go to the basement. My father said, "I'm not moving," so I stayed with him. I went to the bed with him, and we stayed, and the bombing was a short one. And now begins the period when my sister and myself were sent to the stores, but very soon there was an order that Jews can buy food only from 5 o'clock later. And at that time the Lithuanians had bought most of the food already. So my sister and I would go over, but my sister, although she was only 14, she looked much older, so it was dangerous for her also to go. So I was the only buying agent of our family. I was sent to try to buy food. And that was good. There were still many other incidents, but in September, the beginning of September, we got an order that next morning we will go to the ghetto, will be taken to the ghetto. And my father knew that Lithuanian police will take us. So he put on a jacket, and he put on his Lithuanian medals. There were 2 medals were for saving people. And there was a medal of the independence of Lithuania, and he had badges of the Lithuanian independence. So Yeah. Well, you see, yes, here, badges of 15 years and 5 years of independence, 15 years, and they are part of his medals. So he was wearing it on our way to the ghetto. Then we went down, the policemen were very much embarrassed. They said, I must be an important Jew that has Lithuanian medals, and they have to chase him to the ghetto. So they found a solution. The four of us were going in the first row, and some 2 meters after us, all the rest of the people were wearing. And this way we went to the ghetto. We were not brought to the main entrance to the ghetto. There was an unclosed part of the wall, and when we reached it, they pushed everybody, and the influence of the medals finished at that time. There was nothing. So we went into the ghetto. First of all, we were told that everybody can take a person, whatever he can carry, he can take with him. So in the evening we prepared for little persons, whatever we could carry at that age. And we were pushed into the ghetto, so we found an empty apartment downstairs somewhere. We went in a room, we sat near the wall, and more families came in, and you couldn't move already. So my father was very energetic. In the evening he told us he goes to find some solution. And after half an hour or so he came back and said, very happy, I found a small enough room that they will not be able to put any other family. So we went, and it happened to be in the courtyard of the Judenrat. So I showed it to tourists when I was there, and some woman came with a group of Canadians. So I showed them the window. You see, there I was living in this. There are many stories about all of that. And then at the day when the big ghetto was founded, there was a small ghetto too. We were near the Rudnitsky Street, Rudninku. It was a big ghetto, 35,000 people. The small ghetto was in the old city, in the Jewish quarter. There were 11,000 people. But that's interesting. There are many Israelis that think that October 7th was like the Holocaust. So I'm saying that you are mistaken, because when the Germans decided to liquidate the small ghetto, I'm not sure if they did it in 1 day or 2 days. 11,000 people were liquidated. There was another very great difference between the October 7th and the Holocaust. On October 7th, most of the victims and the wounded people, they were calling for help. They were trying to call help. In the Holocaust, they didn't cry for help because there was no address. That was a very great difference. People don't realize it, but that's entirely a different thing. When help did come too late very much on October 7th. But the Holocaust, you had no address to call for help. So all the 4 years There was no help.
Saadia, when you were taken to the ghetto,
Yeah,
did you see any of the Lithuanians? Were they watching you being marched to the ghetto? Or could you
I
see?
can't say that we are looking. We were under such a pressure. I don't know what was in the sides of the streets. I once saw the policemen who were shouting to push us back fast, and we were walking in the first line, and afterwards all the neighborhood. But father took us to the little room. We settled down, and somehow, as a young boy, my father worked as he was a translator of German to Lithuanian, to Polish, to Yiddish, to Russian. So because he was free, and he was some administrative work at some military or maybe a police unit. So he was working, and for 7 weeks it was more or less quiet. The Judenrat organized a police force. They printed a booklet for rations of food. You had to buy it, you had to earn money. So as long as my father was alive, everything was fine. But the Germans decided, first of all, in Vilna there were nearly 90,000 Jews, I think. From the entrance of the Germans to the day we were taken to the ghetto, there were always groups passing our house. The Germans chased groups of elder Jews and of children. They were told that they are taking to a summer resort, but nobody came back. We started hearing about Ponar, where the Jews were shot, and we didn't know that part of those people that were chased, the Germans were cleaning the area where they would do the ghetto. So the houses were, when we went into the ghetto, the houses were empty of their regular people. They were taken. So in the large ghetto were 35,000 people on an area that normally lived maybe 5,000. So it was very, very dense, and the Germans decided they must diminish the population. So they started with what they call Aktion and Aktia. And that it was very, very simple. Every person that worked for Germans had a document, and they changed the color of the document. So when there was an action, let's say, of the pink documents, all the ghetto population was taken out in the evening, and everybody had to pass by a group of Germans, and they were checking papers. So the person that had a document could take his immediate family. So let's say my mother, my sister and myself were legally going with my father. So they were checking all the people. Everybody that had the right paper was directed, let's say, to the left. The ones that didn't have the right paper were taken to the right. After everybody passed by the Germans, the ones that were taken to the right were taken to Ponar. And so every 7 weeks, there was another color. And it was not very simple, because one night before the Axia, there was shouting in a neighboring room near our little room. There were several families. One of the families, there was a couple. They had 3 daughters, and the wife had a mother. So the wife asked her husband to take her mother as his wife, and she would go as a daughter. He didn't agree. So they disguised the grandmother as one of the girls. They put something on her gray hair. They painted her face. They shortened her coat and dress above the knees. And somehow, that night it worked. It was at night. Somehow the Germans didn't realize. Afterwards they disappeared. I don't know the end of them. But that night it disappeared. But there were a lot of such problems. And it was very shocking to a young child like me, because in a neighborhood near our house, there was a young couple that were newlywed. The wedding was before the war started. They were deeply in love, and the young husband was caught by the Germans and killed. So his wife decided to commit suicide, but she didn't want to commit suicide in a quick way. She found a very bad way. She took a package of needles and for 3 days and 3 nights she was shouting until one of the needles came into her heart. But it was awful, her shouts. So,
and you remember hearing?
Please?
You remember hearing?
I remember the shouts. It was awful things. And there were orphan children that were dying in the streets of the ghetto. And there were several actions that by night, until the night of the yellow documents. We came out, and the working place where my father worked didn't print the yellow permits. So people ran around. There were some 40, 50 people working there. And they decided that we will go to the prison, like all the ones that were taken to Bonar afterwards. So we went organized, and we went to the courtyard of the prison, and somehow there they took the men to the side, and the men away. My sister and myself as children went with my mom.
They took your father away?
One moment. We were taken to a large cell. We were among the first ones. We sat along the wall, and they brought in more and more and more women and children. Not all of them had a place where to sit down. They were so dense. Shut the door. Next morning, the door opened, and there was a Jew and his German with a list. They started reading names. All the women and the children started pressing against the door. They were nervous. They knew what they were waiting. The guards started beating, shut the door. Nobody came out. After some hour, again the door opened. It was the same thing, pressed, and the door was shut. The third time, my father was there with his German boss. He saw us and he waved to us, and we waved to him, but pressed, and the door was shut. I didn't know at that time that it was the last wave of my father. My mother, although she was regarded as a weak woman, she somehow, when the door was closed, she came over to the door and she started speaking to the women there. She told them, you see, if you're pressing to the door, no one will be freed. So sit quietly, and people that will be on the list will come out. And she stood there, and I think she hypnotized the people, because the door opened and she was watching them. She was standing at the right side of the door, and they kept quiet, and people were taken out, they were freed. And that day she stood for hours. Next day also, I think in the evening, we were first time taken to the toilet, to the bathroom, because when you don't eat and drink, you don't need so much. So next morning, our mother again stood near the door, and she whispered to us, to my sister, to myself, that when the door is closed, let us try to crawl over to come near the door somehow. And we advanced. And at that time, they began to shout and to cry in the corridors, because they were taking out people ordered to Ponar. So again, the door opened, and although my mother tried to calm them, they didn't calm down, and they pressed to the door. The guards started beating and closing the door, and somehow, when the guard near where my mother stood raised this club to hit, she somehow sneaked out. I don't know what she told them, but after some 20, 30 seconds, the door opened up. My mother put her hand and pulled out my sister and myself. And probably we were the last ones that came out. But we were taken to the place where they concentrated the people that worked with my father. They were together. And we went there. They were taken there to find my father. And we didn't find him there. So I tried to investigate what happened. Nearly for sure, I don't know for sure, but he asked the German to try once again open the door. And a dirty Jew doesn't ask for a favor of a German, and he sent him to Ponar. So we came to the prison 4, and we came back 3. And my mother and my father were very, very near relations. I know that my sister, she came to Israel in 1970. I didn't see her for 27 years. So she couldn't, she still was angry. Why did my father so love the mother? Well, why were they in love so much? There were many things that she couldn't resolve, because there was discipline at our house. There were rules, we were obeying, and everything was okay. So every day we got a plate of sweets, but the cabinet where the sweets were locked. And my mother kept the key. So my sister was already 90 years old. Why didn't she give me the key? Why did she hold the key? She didn't resolve the problems. So it was an awful loss. And the chapter in the book is that my mother didn't cry. she was
So strong.
like a rock, because she had 2 children, and we didn't have a chance for document, because we didn't have anybody working outside. My mother and my sister worked in the kitchen of the Judenrat, so we wouldn't survive anymore selection. And this Joseph Glassman came to Nichum Avelim to us after he heard that my father then came back, and my mother asked him if he can find a place of work for me at the workshops in the ghetto, and he arranged it for me. No, he was this deputy commander of the police. So
In the Judenrat?
Please?
Was he part of the Judenrat? He was part of the Judenrat?
He was police of the Judenrat. He was the Netziv Beitar, he was the chief of the revisionists in Lithuania. Oh, I realized only when I prepared it that he died at the age of 30, and he did so many significant things until then, because he was in Kovna, in Kaunas, and he came over to Vilna, and he took on the deputy chief of the police only as a cover, because he was a commander of one of the battalions of the partisans. And he died in a battle with the Germans after he went to the forest, to the partisans. And luckily there were a year and a half that were no, because it was, I think there were some 5,000 people, no more already. So that was enough. And there were, I would say there were 2 parties in the ghetto. There was Abba Kovner and Glassman that wanted to fight for the honor of the Jewish nation. And there was Gans, that he was the chief of the police, and afterwards he was the head of the Judenrat, who said that we should appease the Germans and try to rescue at least some hundreds, some thousands of people, but let obey their orders. And they were in bad relations. I know that Glassman was even arrested by them, but he was freed by the partisans immediately. And do you know the Wittenberg, Yitzhak Wittenberg? He was the chief of the partisans there. I happened to see when they took him to the gate, to the Germans. But there are different histories. I know it from that time. When they decided that he will surrender to the Germans, he got a capsule of poison. He kept it in his mouth. And when he came to surrender, he came over to them, he bit it, and he died on the spot. He didn't suffer. Now at the Beit Vilna was a ceremony to remember Yitzhak Wittenberg by his family, as a family.
In Saadia, did you have enough? What did you do for food? Did your mother manage to find work, and did you?
My mother worked, and my sister worked, and I earned some money at the workshop, so we could buy the rations. We couldn't buy anything more.
Were you very hungry?
And I knew that there was a theater, and there were concerts in the ghetto of Vilna. And they were announcing a new play. There were also papers against it. Who is doing theater in a cemetery? That was a real fight. At Lochmegedot, they have those papers. So we didn't enjoy it. But as my mother was a young widow, and she was working at the kitchen, and she was also preparing to receiving guests. So different men started advancing to get her, so she left her work and she worked outside. She worked in a factory of bricks, and I think it was already 44, maybe it was 42 in summer 42. She somehow succeeded to arrange for me a vacation of 2 weeks, and she took me to work with her outside the ghetto, because in Vilna ghetto there was one only tree, and the first winter he lost everything that could be broken for warming. I was taking the saw from the workshop, from the carpentry. I was bringing, how do you call it? Well, when you cut wood, you have the cuttings. So.
And Saadia, were you very hungry?
Yeah.
Were you very hungry, or did you?
For 2.5 years, I was very hungry. And my sister, she was rescued at the end, when the ghetto was liquidated. I was taken to Estonia 2 weeks earlier. So when we met, she was speaking about the Vilna ghetto as the worst place on earth. And I was laughing at her that was really a summer resort for me when you are comparing it to the camps in Estonia where I was. And so they were much, much, much worse.